Every angler remembers the one that got away. Most of the time, it wasn't bad luck, it was a mistake they didn't even know they were making. The fish was right there. Then it wasn't. And that gap between almost and actually landing it, that's where beginners live. Here are 10 mistakes that cost beginners the biggest fish and how to stop making them before your next trip. First up, dull hooks. It sounds obvious, but a hook that can't scratch your thumbnail won't set in a fish's mouth either. Run your hook across your thumbnail. If it slides without catching, it's done. Swap it out, takes 30 seconds and saves the whole trip. Mistake 2 is casting too hard. Power doesn't help here. Timing and rod flex do all the work. A hard cast just spooks the fish. Fish near structure, docks, weed edges, submerged rocks. You're placing bait, not launching it into open water hoping something finds it. Number 3, reeling too fast right after the cast. That first second of stillness is often when the biggest fish commits. Don't rush it. Mistake 4 is wrong drag settings. Recommended drag is roughly 1/3 of your line's breaking strength. Not cranked tight, not loose enough to slip freely. A guide lost a tournament winning bass because boat vibration loosened his drag during transit. He forgot to check before the first cast. Gone. 5th mistake, staying too long in dead water. If nothing happens in 15 to 20 minutes, move. Fishing is about locating fish, not waiting them out. 6th mistake is setting the hook wrong. No tension means no connection. Reel down first, create tension, then lift firmly. That sequence matters every time. Setting too early pulls the bait out mid-test. Setting too late lets the fish drop it. The window is short and timing beats strength every time. Mistake 7, high sticking. Lifting your rod straight up concentrates all the pressure at the weakest point, the tip. Keep the rod at roughly a 45-degree angle during the fight. Let the drag do its job. Don't muscle the fish, guide it. Number 8, mismatched gear. A bait casting reel on a spinning rod isn't just ineffective. One angler did exactly that in front of a tournament pro. 3 casts in. You don't need a $700 rod to catch fish. But your rod, reel, and line need to match each other. Mismatched gear kills your presentation. 9th mistake, ignoring bait presentation. A soft plastic rigged even slightly crooked moves unnaturally. Fish notice. They've been eating real things their whole lives. Check your bait every few casts. Weeds, damage, a twisted line, any of it makes your lure look wrong. Clean presentation gets more bites, full stop. The 10th mistake is the one that ties everything else together, not replacing old line. Worn line breaks at the worst possible moment, always. Replace your line every 3 to 6 months, depending on how often you fish. Cheap line costs more in lost fish than quality line ever costs at the store. Most beginners focus on one thing, bait or location, and ignore everything else working against them. It's always a combination of small things adding up. The fish aren't the problem. The setup, the timing, the technique, that's where the real game is played. Fix the small stuff and the big fish follow. Every one of these mistakes is fixable. None of them require expensive gear or years of experience. Just awareness and one better decision at a time. One thing beginners almost never think about is knot strength. A knot tied dry loses up to 30% of its rated strength before the fish even shows up. Wet your knot before tightening it, every time. Friction heat from a dry cinch weakens the line right at the connection point, exactly where you can't afford it. There's also the knot selection problem. Beginners learn one knot and use it for everything. But a Palomar knot and an improved clinch aren't interchangeable. Conditions decide. Midday fishing is another quiet killer. Fish push deep when the sun is high and the water warms. You're casting into empty water and wondering why nothing bites. Early morning and late evening aren't just folklore. That's when fish actively feed near the surface. Show up at 6, not 10. The window closes fast. Beginners also fish the prettiest water instead of the productive water. A scenic open cove looks great. Fish live where food lives. Watch the birds before you cast. Diving terns, circling herons, gulls working a patch of water, they're reading the same food chain you're trying to find. Grabbing the line to land a fish is one of those mistakes that feels instinctive. One Colorado bank angler did it, Snap the line and lost the fish and the entire rig. Use a net or wet your hand and grip the fish properly. Grabbing line under pressure is just handing the fish its exit. It will take it. Something that rarely gets mentioned: storing soft plastics together. Z-Man baits and standard plastics chemically react when touching. One angler opened his tackle box to a melted mess. Keep different plastic brands in separate bags. It takes 10 seconds to sort them. Losing a full tray of rig baits mid-trip is a much worse problem. Not reading water depth is another gap. Fish move vertically more than most beginners realize. The same spot that held bass at 7 feet yesterday might be empty at noon. A depth finder doesn't have to be expensive. Even a basic one tells you whether you're fishing a flat bottom or a ledge. That information changes everything. Using the same lure all day is comfortable but costly. Fish pattern match fast. After an hour on the same retrieve, the bite usually dies, and beginners keep going anyway. Change color, change depth, change speed. If something feels off, swap the bait before you swap the location. The fish might still be there, just uninterested in what you're throwing. Weather shifts matter more than most beginners account for. A cold front moving through drops surface temperature fast. Fish go inactive, and the technique that worked yesterday simply won't. After a front passes, slow down everything. Slower retrieve, lighter bait, longer pauses. Fish aren't gone, they're just not chasing. Make it easy for them to eat. Skipping casting practice before a real trip is a preparation mistake that shows up immediately. The first 30 minutes of a guided trip shouldn't be your warm-up session. 10 minutes of backyard practice before a trip is worth more than an hour of frustrated casting on the water. Muscle memory doesn't build itself on the day you need it. There's a mindset trap too. Social media shows pros landing giants on every clip. Those same pros get completely skunked on regular days, they just don't post it. Unrealistic expectations make beginners quit too early, both on a single trip and on fishing altogether. Patience isn't passive, it's an active part of the technique. If you have the right technique at the right time, those trophies will come. Ian Rubin wrote in Florida Sportsman, "Chasing a trophy every trip just accelerates the mistakes. The anglers who improve fastest aren't the ones with the best gear. They're the ones who notice what went wrong and change one thing before the next cast. Every trip gives you information. The fish that got away told you something. The question is whether you were paying attention when it did." Rod tip pointing directly at the bait is a mistake that kills your reaction time. When a fish hits, there's nothing left to absorb the strike. Keep a slight bend in the rod during the retrieve. That flex is your buffer. It's the difference between a solid hookup and a pulled bait. Splashy casts and calm, shallow water push fish away before the retrieve even starts. The entry matters as much as where the lure lands. Aim for a soft entry, lure first, minimal splash. In clear, still water, fish feel the disturbance before they see anything. Not researching a spot before arriving is a preparation gap most beginners skip entirely. Satellite maps, local forums, even recent fishing reports take 15 minutes. Showing up blind to unfamiliar water means your first hour is just orientation. That's an hour of productive fishing time handed back to the lake. Fly fishing has its own version of every mistake, and drag-free drift is the one that costs the most fish. A dragging fly gets refused almost every time. Mending the line upstream corrects the drift before drag sets in. Most beginners wait too long, then wonder why the trout ignored a perfect pattern. Wet lures stored back in a closed tackle box rust hooks overnight. One damp compartment can ruin a dozen rigs before the next trip starts. Dry your lures before closing the box. A quick wipe takes seconds. Replacing a full tray of corroded hooks takes money and time you didn't plan to spend. Line weight mismatches hurt more than most beginners realize. Heavy line on a light action rod kills sensitivity. You stop feeling subtle bites entirely. Match line weight to the rod's rated range. It's printed on the blank. Ignoring it doesn't just hurt casting, it disconnects you from what's happening underwater. Ignoring what the guide says is expensive. Anglers who follow guide instruction catch 30 to 50% more fish than those who fish their own way. Guides read water for a living. When one tells you to slow down or move 2 feet left, there's a reason. That reason usually has fins. Adrenaline causes more lost fish than bad technique. The moment a big fish hits, beginners speed everything up, reel faster, pull harder, panic. Slow down when a big fish is on. Breathe, let the rod and drag do the work they were built for. Rushing is how hooks tear out. Not observing actual feeding behavior before casting is a common shortcut. That Colorado angler casting dry flies to surface rises? The fish were eating bait fish, not insects. Spent 2 minutes watching before the first cast. What's breaking the surface? Where are the bait fish? The answer changes everything about what you tie on. Cotton clothing is a preparation mistake that turns uncomfortable fast. Wet cotton stays wet and cold. On a long day on the water, that becomes a real problem. Synthetic or merino wool layers manage moisture and keep you functional. Comfort affects focus, and focus affects every decision you make on the water. Over-tightening the line while reeling during a fight is a pressure spike waiting to happen. The fish surges, the line has nowhere to go, and something breaks. When a fish runs, let it run. Palming the spool or forcing the reel against a strong fish is how you lose both the fish and your confidence. Success in fishing is often subtle. Mistakes are loud. That line from fishes here sticks because it's accurate, the errors announce themselves, the wins don't. The gap between a beginner and a confident angler isn't talent, it's accumulated small corrections, each trip a little cleaner than the last. Tipping a guide is something most beginners never think about. Skip it and that guide remembers. Your next trip gets noticeably less effort. 15 to 20% of the trip cost, in cash, is standard. It's not charity, it's how guides know you value their work. Strip setting versus rod tip setting is a distinction most beginners never learn. For streamers in saltwater, a strip set keeps the fly in the fish's mouth. A violent rod sweep on a take pulls the fly clean out. The fish felt it for half a second, then it was gone. Depth wins in still water. Brian Chan built an entire teaching philosophy around it. Fish suspended at the wrong depth simply won't eat your fly. Count your fly down to the fish's level before retrieving. Guessing depth and hoping is just expensive casting practice with no feedback. Kayak transport mistakes cost more than fish. One angler ran highway speeds with a loaded kayak and improper straps. Friction melted part of the hull. Cardboard between the strap and hull prevents contact damage. It takes 1 minute to add and saves a repair bill that runs into hundreds of dollars. Pre-tied rigs feel convenient but cost more over time. Learning to tie your own knots means you know exactly what strength you're fishing with. No knot is best for all fishing styles. Geisley's education team put it plainly. Conditions decide the knot, not habit. Hammer setting on a light tippet is a fast way to lose both the fish and the fly. 5-weight tippet doesn't forgive a hard swing. Mother Nature is my business partner, one Florida guide said. Conditions change daily. The angler who adapts catches fish. The one who doesn't goes home empty. Getting distracted by a fishing companion is more costly than it sounds. Missed strikes happen in under a second. Conversation fills that window fast. Keep the social part for the drive home. On the water, one eye stays on the line. That's not antisocial, that's just how it works. Wind lanes concentrate food on the surface. Beginners ignore them. Experienced anglers position right along the edge and work it methodically. Weed beds aren't obstacles, they're addresses. Bass, pike, and perch use them as cover and ambush points. Cast to the edge, not past it. Quick change swivels without silicone sleeves can slip under pressure. Nash documented this in product testing. The connection holds until it suddenly doesn't. Small rigging details like that don't feel important until a big fish exposes them. Check every connection before the first cast, not after the first loss. Every angler starts somewhere, and every angler makes mistakes. The ones who improve are simply the ones who stay curious. Keeping a simple log, spot, time, bait, result turns random trips into actual data. The fish aren't random, they're predictable once you have enough information to see the pattern. That information only comes from paying attention consistently. None of this requires expensive gear, guided trips, or years on the water. It requires showing up with the right habits already in place. The fish are out there. The mistakes covered here are the only things standing between a beginner and a genuinely great day on the water. If this helped, share it with someone who's just getting started. If you want to learn more, then go watch this video where I tell the biggest scams beginners fall for when buying their fishing gear. Every state has that one lake locals don't talk about too loudly. We found them anyway. The waters that actually produce the biggest fish in the country. This isn't a list of pretty scenery or tourist spots. These are the lakes where the fish are genuinely massive and the records keep falling. Texas sits at the top of the conversation, and it's not even close. The Lone Star State has 10 lakes in the national top 100 rankings. Lake Fork alone holds the Texas state record largemouth, plus the next 5 heaviest catches ever documented in the state. That's 1 lake, 6 records. Since 1986, the Texas Sharelunker program has verified 3,648 bass over 8 pounds, all from Texas waters. Florida punches just as hard. Year-round warm water means bass grow faster there than almost anywhere else in the country. Lake Okeechobee covers over 730 square miles and regularly produces largemouth averaging 7 to 10 pounds. Some push past 12. California surprises people. Clear Lake ranked number 1 in the entire country, beating every lake in Texas and Florida. Volcanic soils and a Mediterranean climate push bass growth rates there to nearly double what you'd see in typical waters. 17-pound fish have come out of Clear Lake. Derwin Chang described his best day there simply: second cast, a bass. Third cast, another. Fourth cast, another. He was culling fish by 8 in the morning. Up in Minnesota, Lake of the Woods earns its nickname honestly. 14,500 islands and some of the best walleye fishing on the planet. Real quick, my name is Jake Watson. I have been an angler for over 20 years, ever since I was a little kid when my father used to take me fishing. I have dedicated this channel to helping share my passion with like-minded anglers like me, as I plan to reveal every secret there is about fishing, taking it from a game of luck to an actual skill set. So it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Anyways, let's continue. Lake Erie produces more walleye than any other lake in America. Its shallow depth creates spawning conditions the deeper Great Lakes simply can't match. Lake Guntersville in Alabama covers 70,000 acres and hosts Major League Fishing tournaments regularly. Spring and fall, the bass fishing there is genuinely world class. Then there's O.H. Ivy in Texas, a lake that came out of nowhere. It produced 30 Sharelunker bass in just the first 4 months of 2023. Leah Ann Powell caught a 12-pound 3-ounce largemouth there on a Demiki rig through flooded timber. It became an IGFA world record. She calls it her favorite water, bar none. Lake Champlain on the Vermont-New York border is a completely different fishery. Smallmouth bass there are the target, and June through August they are absolutely on fire. Jake Angulis once located a massive school of smallmouth on a rocky hump dropping from 60 feet to 30. His best 5 fish that day totaled over 100 inches combined. Lake St. Clair sits between Lake Huron and Lake Erie near Detroit. It's 420 square miles of diverse game fish that most people completely overlook. Folsom Lake in California is what anglers call a love-hate relationship. Crystal clear water and granite boulders make it brutally difficult until it turns on completely. Joseph Tax documented 100 fish days there using a simple drop shot. When Folsom clicks, it clicks hard and makes every tough day worth it. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake on Earth by surface area. 31,700 square miles. The fish that live in those cold depths grow old and enormous. Every region has its standout water. The South has volume and size, the Great Lakes have diversity, and the West has quality that makes up for lower numbers. We're going state by state through every single one. The lakes are ranked, the fish are real, and some of these picks are going to genuinely surprise you. New York has 6 world-class fisheries in the national top 100. Cayuga Lake is the one serious smallmouth anglers keep circling back to. Justin Hausner has fished Cayuga for over a decade and says wind is everything there. North or south, it makes that water genuinely angry. Early spring, the north end shallows warm first. That's when topwater frogs start producing, and the fish are stacked tight near the weed edges. After sunrise, Hausner switches to skipping a Senko under docks, then jerkbaits down weed lines, then a jig hopped across rock piles. 3 completely different presentations. One morning, Sam Rayburn Reservoir in Texas is a different animal entirely. East and West Coast styles combined in one place. There's a reason the Big Bass Splash runs out of Sam Rayburn. Consistently big fish, diverse cover, and enough water that pressure doesn't kill the bite. Lake Eufaula on the Oklahoma-Alabama border is built for punching and pitching. Heavy vegetation, shallow flats, and bass that absolutely bury themselves in the thickest stuff they can find. Lake Ontario gets overlooked because its siblings get all the attention. But the annual salmon runs near Oswego and Rochester draws serious anglers every fall without fail. Kentucky Lake stretches across Tennessee and Kentucky for 184 miles. It's one of the largest man-made lakes in the country and produces crappie in staggering numbers. Lake Michigan covers 22,400 square miles and has an entire charter industry built around it. Coho salmon, Chinook, lake trout. The diversity there is hard to match. Lake Tahoe sits at 6,200 feet elevation on the California-Nevada border. Strict 5 fish limits have kept the fishery healthy for decades. The clarity there cuts both ways. You can see fish in 30 feet of water, and they can absolutely see you coming. Striped bass on Lake Powell regularly push past 40 pounds. The canyon structure creates ambush points that concentrate fish in ways flat water reservoirs simply cannot. Utah's tiger trout record sits at 19 pounds, 2 ounces, set in 2013. There are waters in that state where the next record is probably already swimming. South Carolina's Santee Cooper Lakes still hold a channel catfish world record from 1964, 58 pounds. 60 years later, nobody has beaten it. That record has outlasted careers, generations of tackle, and every improvement in fishing technology. Whatever that fish was eating, it worked. Lake Huron covers 23,000 square miles and connects to both Superior and Michigan. Its Georgian Bay section alone could occupy a serious angler for an entire season. The northern tier lakes demand patience. Cold water slows everything down. The fish, the presentations, the whole pace of the day. Rocky structure replaces flooded timber up there. Instead of pitching to stumps, you're hopping jigs across gravel points and ledges dropping into deep cold water. The management side of this matters more than people realize. When water levels get manipulated for flood control, fish die by the thousands. Anglers have watched it happen firsthand. One YouTuber documented a lake drain and found a dead tiger trout he estimated at 15 pounds. He said he was lost for words. The state record might have died in the mud. Conservation programs work when they're actually followed. The Texas and Florida models prove that protecting big fish long enough to reproduce changes an entire fishery ceiling. Every lake on this list earned its spot through documented fish, real records, and anglers who keep coming back. The next section gets into the ones that almost nobody talks about. The lakes nobody talks about loudly are often the ones producing the biggest fish. That's where this section lives. The overlooked, the underrated, and the genuinely surprising. Lake Seminole sits where Georgia, Florida, and Alabama meet. Hydrilla so thick you can practically walk on it. And largemouth that have never seen tournament pressure. Wheeler Lake in Alabama runs alongside the Tennessee River and gets completely ignored next to Guntersville. That's exactly why the bass fishing there stays so consistently good. Mark Stevenson caught the first share lunker entry ever recorded. 17 pounds, 67 hundredths of an ounce, Lake Fork, 1986. That fish started an entire movement. Lake Texoma straddles Oklahoma and Texas and produces striped bass that genuinely shock people. 30-pound fish are not unusual there during the spring shad spawn. Truman Lake in Missouri is one of the most underutilized crappie fisheries in the Midwest. The brush pile density there is almost absurd. Anglers have been sinking structure for decades. Lake Havasu on the Arizona-California border runs hot year-round. Stripers, largemouth, smallmouth, and catfish all share the same water, which almost never happens at that scale. Mille Lacs in Minnesota lost its walleye season entirely for several years due to population concerns. It came back, but the regulations there are still tighter than anywhere else in the state. That kind of management pressure changes how anglers approach a fishery. You stop keeping fish and start thinking about what the lake looks like in 10 years. Lake Ouachita in Arkansas is the clearest lake in the state, visibility past 20 feet in some spots. Spotted bass thrive there in ways they simply don't in murkier water. Spotted bass get dismissed because they run smaller than largemouth, but a 4-pound spot on light tackle in clear water fights harder than most fish twice its size. Flaming Gorge Reservoir crosses Utah and Wyoming and holds a lake trout record that still stands, 50 pounds even, caught in 1994. Nobody has touched it since. The depth there reaches over 400 feet in sections. Lake trout in that cold, dark water grow at a pace that makes most other fisheries look rushed. Chesapeake Bay isn't a lake, but its tributary rivers, the Susquehanna, the Potomac, produce striped bass runs that draw anglers from 6 states every spring without fail. Lake Winnebago in Wisconsin is the largest inland lake in the state. Its sturgeon season runs for 16 days in February and draws thousands of spearfishers onto the ice. Sturgeon there can exceed 100 pounds and live past 100 years. You're not just catching a fish, you're catching something older than most people's grandparents. Lake Tohopekaliga in Florida, locals call it Lake Toho, produces giant bass in February and March when the spawn stacks fish shallow and visible. Guides there charge premium rates during spawn season and still book out months ahead. When the fish are bedding on Toho, word travels fast. Bull Shoals Lake on the Arkansas-Missouri border runs cold below the dam and warm above it. That temperature split creates 2 completely different fisheries within the same body of water. The tailwater below Bull Shoals Dam produces brown trout over 20 pounds. The reservoir above it produces largemouth over 10. Same address, completely different fish. Every state has a version of this, a lake that rewards the angler willing to look past the obvious choice. The famous lakes are famous for a reason, but they're not the whole story. The final section pulls it all together, the patterns that separate the best waters from the rest, and what actually makes a lake capable of producing a record-class fish. What separates a record-class lake from a decent one comes down to 3 things: food, structure, and time. Fish need all 3 working together. Forage density matters more than most anglers admit. A lake stuffed with shad and bluegill grows bass twice as fast as one running lean. That's why Lake Chickamauga in Tennessee keeps producing. Shad populations there are almost absurdly thick, and the bass have nowhere to go but up and wait. Watts Bar Lake, also in Tennessee, sits just upstream and gets a fraction of the pressure. Same forage base, same structure, far fewer boats. Pressure is the variable nobody wants to talk about honestly. A Great Lake fished hard every weekend eventually trains its fish to ignore most presentations. That's the real argument for fishing second-tier lakes. The fish haven't been educated yet, and the angler willing to drive an extra hour usually wins. Lake Dardanelle in Arkansas produces striped bass that most people associate with coastal fisheries. 40-pound fish show up there with enough regularity to stop being surprising. Ross Barnett Reservoir in Mississippi gets overlooked almost universally. Its crappie fishing in March rivals anything in Kentucky or Tennessee. The brush pile network is enormous. Lake Lanier in Georgia sits 45 miles north of Atlanta and still produces quality spotted bass despite absorbing enormous recreational pressure every summer weekend. Spotted bass on Lanier runs smaller than largemouth, but the lake's clarity and rocky structure make every fish a legitimate fight on light tackle. Rainy Lake on the Minnesota-Ontario border rarely makes American lists because half of it is in Canada. The walleye and northern pike there are genuinely world-class. Cross-border fisheries like Rainy Lake operate under 2 sets of regulations simultaneously. Knowing which side of the line you're on matters, the rules are not the same. Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota is the 3rd largest reservoir in the country by volume. Its walleye and Chinook salmon fishery is one of the most underreported in the nation. The Missouri River system that feeds it carries nutrients that keep the forage base strong even through brutal winters. Cold slows the fish, it doesn't stop them. Elephant Butte Reservoir in New Mexico holds the state record for striped bass, 54 pounds, 8 ounces caught in 2001. That record is still standing. Desert reservoirs age differently than southern lakes. Less vegetation, harder structure, clearer water. The fish that survive there tend to be older and considerably harder to fool. The pattern across every region is consistent. The best lakes share deep forage, varied structure, and management that gives big fish enough time to actually get big. No single state owns the conversation. That's the honest truth about chasing big fish. The map keeps changing. Records fall, lakes recover, and the angler paying attention finds the window before everyone else does. Every lake on this list earned its reputation through real fish and real documentation. The rankings shift, but the underlying quality of these waters doesn't disappear overnight. The best fishing of your life is probably on a lake you haven't tried yet. That's not a bad thing. It means there's still something worth going after. If this helped you find your next water, share it with someone who needs a new lake. Subscribe. There's a full state-by-state breakdown coming that goes even deeper. A bobber and worm setup is the most underrated rig in freshwater fishing, but most people are quietly sabotaging it with mistakes they don't even realize they're making. The worm goes on wrong. The bobber sits at the wrong depth. The hook is too big. Any one of those kills your chances before the fish even shows up. Even people who've been fishing this way for years are leaving fish in the water. The fix isn't complicated, but you have to know what you're actually doing wrong first. Worms work because fish are hardwired to eat them. Small, wriggling, defenseless, that's basically a dinner bell for anything swimming beneath your bobber. Trout, bluegill, bass, crappie, they all respond to a well-presented worm. The species list for this rig is genuinely long. The problem is the presentation part. Real quick, my name is Jake Watson. I have been an angler for over 20 years, ever since I was a little kid when my father used to take me fishing. I have dedicated this channel to helping share my passion with like-minded anglers like me, as I plan to reveal every secret there is about fishing, taking it from a game of luck to an actual skill set. So it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Anyways, let's continue. The single biggest mistake most people make is using the whole nightcrawler. You throw that full worm on and it just hangs there in a limp, lifeless clump. Fish aren't impressed by volume. They want movement. A wriggling worm is far more attractive than something limp, and a whole crawler rarely wiggles the way you need it to. Cut it down. For trout and panfish, 2 to 4 inches is your sweet spot. Leave about an inch dangling off the hook so it actually moves in the water. Now, the hook. Most beginners go too big, thinking bigger hook means bigger fish. It mostly just means fewer bites and a worm that looks ridiculous on the rig. For panfish and trout, a size 6 to 10 hook is where you want to be. Small enough to hide in the bait, strong enough to hold when something actually takes it. Threading the worm matters too. Pierce it about ½ an inch from the tip, then slide it up the shank. Leave that tail end hanging loose below the bend. That tail is doing the work. It wiggles, it pulses, it looks alive. The moment you bury the whole worm on the hook, you've turned dinner into a lump of nothing. Next problem, the bobber depth. Most people set it and forget it, but fish aren't always at the same depth, and a bait hanging in empty water catches nothing. Start at 12 inches between the bobber and hook. If nothing's happening after a few minutes, slide the bobber up and give the bait more depth. Keep adjusting until you find them. In shallow water, 12 inches is usually enough. Deeper ponds and lakes, you might need to push that bobber up to 24 inches or beyond to reach where fish are holding. The cast itself is another place people go wrong. A hard snap cast sends the worm flying off the hook before it ever hits the water. You've basically just fed the air. Use a lob cast instead. Let about 2 to 3 feet of line hang from the rod tip, load it slowly, then swing smooth and release high. The worm stays on every time. Once that bobber is out there, the waiting game starts. And this is where impatience kills more catches than any gear mistake. People yank the rod at the first twitch. A twitch means a fish is mouthing the bait. That's curiosity, not commitment. Wait for the bobber to dip fully under or start moving sideways. That's your fish. Set it then. When you do set the hook, keep it smooth. A firm upward pull is all you need. Snap it too hard and you either pop the line or rip the hook clean through. Bait quality is something most people ignore completely. A dead, dried out worm sitting in a hot tackle box is not going to catch fish. Keep them cool and keep them alive. Dunk your worm in the water before you rig it if it's looking sluggish. A rehydrated worm moves again. Movement is the whole point of using live bait in the first place. Reading the water matters just as much as the rig. Cast towards structure, logs, weed edges, rocky points. Fish aren't randomly scattered. They're sitting somewhere specific, waiting for food to come to them. Get the depth right, rig the worm properly, cast smooth, and wait for the real bite. Every one of these mistakes is fixable today. Fix them all and the bobber goes under a lot more often. There's one piece of gear most people completely overlook: the line itself. Heavy line telegraphs the rig, and fish in clear water will turn away from it. 4 to 8 pound test monofilament is the range you want for most freshwater bobber fishing. Go heavier and you're working against yourself. Fluorocarbon is nearly invisible underwater. If you're fishing clear ponds or pressured lakes where fish have seen every rig in the tackle shop, it makes a real difference. Split shot weights are another thing people skip entirely. Without them, a light worm barely sinks and the whole rig drifts wherever the wind pushes it. Pinch 1 or 2 small split shots about 6 inches above the hook. That gets the bait down faster and keeps it where you actually want it sitting. Time of day matters more than most people admit. Early morning and late afternoon are when fish feed hardest. Midday, they go deep and slow down. If you're fishing at noon in summer and getting nothing, the fish aren't gone, they've just dropped deeper and gone quiet. Adjust depth or come back later. Spring rain is genuinely one of the best times to run this rig. Worms wash into the water naturally, and fish are already looking up expecting them. After a good rain, go bigger with your worm piece. Fish are keyed in on larger offerings washing through, and they're actively hunting rather than just browsing. Red wigglers are worth knowing about separately from nightcrawlers. They're smaller, livelier, and in cold or clear water, they often outperform the bigger worm by a wide margin. Cold water slows everything down, including nightcrawlers. A sluggish worm in 40-degree water isn't doing much. A red wiggler stays active and keeps moving when others quit. Weed edges are some of the most productive spots you'll ever cast to. Fish sit just inside the edge, using the weeds as cover, waiting for food to drift past. Don't cast into the middle of open water and wait. Open water is a cafeteria with no tables. Fish pass through, but they don't hang around. Wind-blown shorelines concentrate food. Insects, larvae, and debris pile up on the windward bank. Fish know this. Cast into the wind, not away from it. The knot connecting your hook to the line is a failure point nobody talks about. A poorly tied knot doesn't just slip, it goes at the worst possible moment. Wet your knot before you cinch it down. Dry monofilament generates friction heat when pulled tight, and that heat weakens the line right at the knot. A simple improved clinch knot is all you need here. 5 wraps, thread back through, pull tight wet. That knot holds under real pressure without overcomplicating anything. Bobber type actually matters in moving water. A round bobber catches current and drags your bait sideways. A slim pencil style bobber cuts through it and holds position. Slip bobbers give you one big advantage over clip-on styles. You can cast them much farther without the rig tangling. For distance fishing, they're the cleaner option. After landing a fish, check your worm before recasting. A chewed up, shredded piece of bait catches nothing. Fresh bait on every cast is a habit that pays off. Drag setting on your reel matters even for panfish. Too tight and a hard running fish snaps the line. Loose enough to give a little and you land more. Keep the rod tip up while you're fighting a fish. A low rod gives the fish more leverage and more angles to throw the hook. Up means control. Don't horse the fish straight to the surface. Let it run a little, tire itself out, then bring it in. Panfish especially will flip off a hook if rushed. Every one of these details compound. Fix the line weight, the knot, the bobber type, the timing, and suddenly the same rig you've always used starts working like it never did before. Color matters more than most people think. A bright red or orange bobber is easy to track, but in shallow clear water it can spook fish sitting just below the surface. Switch to a smaller, darker bobber in clear condition. Less surface disturbance, less shadow, less reason for a wary fish to turn around before it ever reaches your bait. Hook placement on the worm changes depending on current. In still water, threading works fine. In moving water, you want the hook closer to the middle so the worm doesn't fold and spin. Spinning bait is a problem nobody warned you about. A worm that rotates on the retrieve twists your line into a mess and looks completely unnatural to any fish watching it. If your line keeps twisting, the worm is the culprit. Re-rig it flatter against the hook shank and the spinning stop. Takes 30 seconds and saves the whole session. Scent is something bass and catfish anglers take seriously, but panfish anglers mostly ignore it. Your sunscreen, bug spray, and fuel smell transfer directly onto the bait through your hand. Rinse your hands in the lake before handling bait. Takes 5 seconds. Fish have a sense of smell that puts most mammals to shame, and foreign scent on a worm kills the bite. Retrieve speed is something people forget entirely with bobber fishing. Most just cast and sit, but a slow, occasional pull of a foot or two can trigger fish that ignored a stationary bait. You're not jigging it, just giving the worm a little life. A short pull, a pause, another pull. It's the difference between a meal sitting on the table and one walking past. Fishing the same spot for 20 minutes with zero action means the fish aren't there. Move down the bank. 10 feet can be the difference between empty water and a school of bluegill. Shadows from trees and docks concentrate fish in summer. The shade drops water temperature a few degrees and fish stack up in it. Cast into the edge of the shadow, not the open sun. Overhanging branches are worth targeting specifically. Insects fall from them constantly. Fish sit directly below waiting, and a worm dropping into that zone gets eaten fast. Depth changes on the lake bottom matter too. Where a flat bottom suddenly drops off, fish hold right on that edge. Cast to the drop, not the flat. You can find drop-offs by counting down. Cast out, count how long the bait takes to settle at different distances. Where the count jumps, the bottom dropped. That's your spot. Braid as a main line with a fluorocarbon leader is worth trying if you're fishing pressured water regularly. The braid gives sensitivity, the leader disappears near the hook where it counts. Tying braid to fluorocarbon takes a specific knot. The double uni works well here. A standard clinch knot between those two materials will slip under load and cost you fish. Rod sensitivity changes what you notice. A stiff rod deadens the feel of a light bite. A light or medium light action rod transmits every tap, every nudge, every hesitation. You don't need expensive gear for this rig to work. A $40 light spinning combo does everything a $200 setup does when you're fishing worms under a bobber. Catch and release handling affects whether that fish survives. Wet your hand before grabbing it, keep it horizontal, and get it back in the water quickly. A flop fish on dry dock often doesn't recover. If you're keeping fish, a small cooler with ice is the right move. Fish left in a bucket of warm water in summer sun deteriorate fast and taste worse for it. Noise travels through water faster than through air. Stomping on a dock, dropping a tackle box, banging the side of a boat, fish feel all of it and scatter. Move quietly. Step softly on dock. Lower gear instead of dropping it. The fish you didn't spook before your first cast are the ones you actually get a shot at. Consistency is what separates people who catch fish regularly from people who get lucky occasionally. Same rig, same habits, same attention to detail every single time out. The bobber and worm rig never stopped working. Most people just stopped working it properly. Fix the small things and the results follow. Every trip, not just the lucky one. Worm color is something almost nobody considers. Pale, washed out worms sitting in old bedding are less attractive than dark, healthy ones, and fish absolutely notice the difference. Store your worms in fresh bedding and keep the container moist. A healthy worm stays dark, firm, and active, exactly what you want dangling below that bobber. Barbed hooks hold worms dramatically better than barbless. A worm sliding down the shank mid-cast bunches at the bend and kills the presentation before it hits water. Bait holder hooks have two small barbs along the shank specifically for this. They're cheap, widely available, and solve the sliding problem completely without any extra rigging. Circle hooks are worth trying if you're catching and releasing. They tend to hook fish in the corner of the mouth rather than deep, which makes release faster and cleaner. Mealworms are an underused option most people walk right past in the bait shop. For small trout in cold, clear streams, they match the natural insect larvae fish are already eating. Bloodworms are another option worth keeping in mind for brackish or tidal freshwater. Species like perch and white bass respond to them when nightcrawlers get ignored. Your bobber stop matters more in moving water than people realize. A stop that slips under current pressure lets the bobber creep down the line and ruins your depth setting mid-session. Rubber bobber stops outlast the peg style ones by a wide margin. They grip the line without damaging it and hold position through repeated casts without needing adjustment. While I respond to worms under a bobber more than most people expect. There are species with a reputation for difficulty, but a slow drifted worm at the right depth catches them consistent. For walleye specifically, longer worm sections work better, closer to the full crawler. They're bigger fish hunting bigger meals, and a small piece just doesn't register the same way. Carp are catchable on this rig too, though they require more patience. They mouth bait cautiously before committing, so the bobber will dance for a long time before it goes under hard. A long rod helps when fishing from a bank with vegetation behind you. More rod length means a wider casting arc and fewer worms lost to branches on the backswing. Telescoping rods are genuinely practical for bank fishing in tight spots. They collapse small enough to carry through brush and extend to a useful length once you reach the water. The first fish a kid catches on a bobber and worm is rarely forgotten. That moment, the bobber going under, the rod bending, is what creates anglers, not gear or technique. That's the real reason this rig has lasted. It's not the simplest option, it's the most honest one. The fish either want it or they don't, and you learn to read which is which. Every adjustment covered here, depth, hook size, worm length, line weight, is really just about removing the reasons a fish might say no. You're eliminating excuses one at a time. The rig itself never needed fixing. What needed fixing was the assumption that throwing it out there was enough. Presentation is the whole game, and it always has been. Fish the structure, match the depth, keep the bait alive, and wait for the real bite. Those 4 things done consistently will outperform any fancy lure on most days. The anglers who catch fish regularly aren't using secret gear. They're just not making the small mistakes that quietly add up to an empty bucket by the end of the day. Every trip teaches you something if you're paying attention. A missed bite tells you the depth is off. A worm that comes back shredded tells you fish are there, but the hook is wrong. The water is always giving you information. Most people just aren't reading. A still bobber in the wrong spot isn't bad luck. It's a message telling you to move. This rig works in farm ponds, city park lakes, mountain streams, and tidal backwaters. The species change, the depth changes, the fundamentals don't. That's what makes it worth mastering. If any of this changed how you fish, share it with someone who's still making the mistake. And subscribe, there's a lot more water to cover. Walk into any tackle shop as a beginner and you'll leave $200 lighter wondering if you even bought the right stuff. You probably didn't. The fishing industry sells beginners the idea that more gear equals more fish. That's the scam. It's never been true. 40 million Americans fish freshwater every year. Most of the ones catching big fish aren't using $40 lures or $500 rods. One guy put it perfectly, bass fishing doesn't need to look like a tackle commercial. You don't need 20 rods or a boat that sounds like it's late for work. Here's what actually happens. Beginners buy too much. Half their gear never touches water and the other half just gets in the way. A solid beginner setup costs around $300 total. Rod, reel, line, lures, terminal tackle, the works. That's it. Start with a 6.5 to 7 foot medium power rod. That length hits the sweet spot between casting distance and actual control. Pair it with a 2500 to 3000 size spinning reel. Smooth drag is everything. That's what protects your line when a big fish runs. Real quick, my name is Jake Watson. I have been an angler for over 20 years ever since I was a little kid when my father used to take me fishing. I have dedicated this channel to helping share my passion with like-minded anglers like me, as I plan to reveal every secret there is about fishing, taking it from a game of luck to an actual skill set. So it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Anyways, let's continue. For line, beginners should start with monofilament, 6 to 10 pound test. It's forgiving, easy to tie, and casts clean off the spool. Berkeley Tri-Lean XL runs about $25 a spool. That's a full season of fishing for the price of one fancy lunch. Now, lures, you need 3. Not 30, 3. Everything else is marketing dressed up as fishing advice. First is the stick bait, a Senko-style worm and green pumpkin. Cast near cover, let it fall on slack line, and wait for that shimmy to do the work. Use a wacky hook with an O-ring and each worm survives 3 or 4 fish instead of 1. That's real money saved over a season. Second lure is a square bill crankbait. Throw it along rocks, docks, and laydowns. When it deflects off something, pause, that's when fish strike. Third is a hollow body frog for thick grass and lily pads. Trim the legs half an inch shorter and it walks easier, turning more strikes into hookups. That's your whole arsenal. 3 lures covering open water, heavy cover, and the surface. Most tournament anglers win on less variety than that. Terminal tackle matters more than beginners realize. Tungsten weights, 97% pure, give you better feel than lead and take up less space on the rig. Barrel swivels stop line twist when you're running spinners. Use snaps only for quick lure swaps, never on finesse rigs where they kill the action. The 3 rigs worth learning are the Texas rig for heavy cover, the Carolina rig for open water, and the wacky rig for stick baits. Master those first, timing matters too. Summer mornings before 8 and evenings after 6 are when bass feed aggressively. Midday heat pushes them deep and quiet. Overcast days are underrated. Cloud cover makes fish bolder and more active near the surface. Rain cools the water and triggers feeding. A simple setup teaches you more about how bass actually behave than a trunk full of glittery gadgets ever will. That's not an opinion, it's just experience talking. The goal was never to look like you know what you're doing. It's to actually know. 3 lures, 1 solid combo, and time on the water gets you there. Line memory is a real problem nobody warned you about. If your mono's coiling off the spool, tie it to a tree, walk back 25 yards, and pull it taut. That tension relaxes the coils and the line casts clean again. Old trick, still works, costs nothing. Gear ratio is something beginners skip over entirely. A 5.2 to 6.2 to 1 ratio is the sweet spot, fast enough for bass. Forgiving enough to learn on. Go too fast and you'll burn through a retrieve before the fish even decides. Mid-range keeps you in the zone longer. Fill your spool to about 1/16 of an inch below the rim. Too full and you get loops. Too low and your cast dies halfway to the target. The Ugly Stick GX2 is nearly unbreakable and runs under $60. The same. Croy Bass X costs more but gives you real feedback through the blank. Either one will last years if you rinse it after use and don't slam it in a car door. That's the full maintenance plan. The Okuma Seymar A has an anti-reverse switch that beginners actually appreciate. It stops the handle from spinning backward when a fish surges. Saves a lot of frustration. Fluorocarbon line is worth knowing about, even if you're not ready for it yet. It sinks, it's nearly invisible underwater, and it transmits feel better than mono. Seaguar Red Label is the standard recommendation when you make that jump, but mono first. Always mono first. Braided line is a different animal entirely. Zero stretch, maximum sensitivity, and it'll cut your finger if you're not careful pulling a snag free. Braid shines in heavy grass and frog fishing, exactly where mono would snap and fluorocarbon would fray. It's a tool for specific situations, not a replacement. Spring and fall are when bass feed most aggressively. Spawning season in spring means fish are territorial and will strike out of instinct, not just hunger. Winter fishing isn't dead, it's just slower. Bass metabolism drops, so slow your retrieve down to almost nothing. Afternoon warmth is your window. Reading water is the skill that separates people who catch fish from people who just cast. Structure holds fish, points, drop-offs, submerged timber, dock shadows. A fish finder isn't necessary when you're starting out. Your eyes and a good pair of polarized sunglasses will show you more than you'd expect. Hooking a fish and landing a fish are 2 completely different events. A lot of beginners lose good fish during the fight because they reel against a running fish. When a fish runs, let the drag do its job. Keep the rod up, maintain pressure, and don't horse it. The drag is there for exactly this moment. Presentation speed matters more than lure color in most situations. Bigger fish spook easily. A slow, deliberate retrieve gets more strikes than a frantic one. A net is worth carrying. Trying to lip a big bass while standing on a slippery bank is how good fish get dropped, and good days turn bad fast. Needle nose pliers are non-negotiable. Hook removal without them is slow, messy, and occasionally painful. A $10 pair lasts a decade. A fishing license runs about $20 in most states. It's not optional, and game wardens do check. Don't let a $40 fine ruin a free morning. The whole system works because it's honest. Simple gear, proven rigs, real timing, and enough patience to let the water tell you something. That's the actual edge. Knot strength is the one thing that actually stands between you and losing a good fish. A bad knot fails at the worst possible moment every single time. The Palomar knot is where you start. Double the line, loop it through the eye, tie an overhand, pass the hook through the loop. Done. Holds near 100%. Wet the knot before you cinch it. Dry friction burns mono and weakens the line right at the point where it matters most. One small habit, real difference. An inline spinner is worth adding as a fourth lure, especially for beginners. It teaches you what a strike actually feels like before you've developed any sensitivity at all. Cast it across current, let it swing real slow. The blade vibrates the whole way back. When something interrupts that vibration, that's your fish. Color matters less than most people think. Bass see contrast more than specific hues. Natural tones in clear water, darker or chartreuse in murky, that's the whole color theory. Wind direction is something experienced anglers watch closely. Fish tend to stack on the windward bank, bait fish get pushed there, and bass follow the food. A tackle backpack beats a hard tackle box for bank fishing. You're moving, covering water, and a box just becomes dead weight after the first half mile. Keep your tackle organized by rig type, not lure type. Texas rig stuff in one pouch, wacky rig in another. You'll spend less time digging and more time fishing. Sun protection is genuinely underrated. A up 50 shirt and polarized glasses aren't luxury items. They're the difference between 2 hours and a full day on the water. Polarized lenses cut the surface glare and let you see into the water column. You'll spot fish, structure, and depth changes that other anglers walk right past. A small first aid kit and a hook removal tool belong in the bag. Hooks go into fingers more than fish some days. Be ready for it. Catch and release done right means keeping the fish horizontal and wet. Vertical holds by the jaw stress the spine on bigger bass. 30 seconds out of water is the limit. Revive the fish before you let go. Hold it upright in the water. Move it gently forward and back until it kicks out of your hands on its own terms. Local fishing reports from your state's Department of Natural Resources are free and genuinely useful. They'll tell you what's biting, where, and on what, updated weekly in most states. Talking to people at the boat ramp is underrated intelligence gathering. Someone who fished that water yesterday will tell you more than any YouTube video ever could. Local tackle shops are worth visiting even if you buy nothing. The person behind the counter fishes that water constantly and usually has no reason to steer you wrong. Keep a simple log, date, weather, water temp, what worked. After a full season, patterns emerge that no article can give you. Your own data beats everyone else's advice. Water temperature is the single most reliable predictor of bass behavior. A cheap thermometer tells you more than a $100 fish finder in most bank fishing situations. 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit is the feeding window most bass anglers chase. Below 50, everything slows. Above 75, fish go deep and get selective. The gear conversation eventually ends and the fishing conversation begins. That shift happens when you stop thinking about what's in your bag and start thinking about what's in the water. Nobody remembers the rod they used on their best day. They remember the fish, the light, and who was standing next to them. That's what you're actually out there for. Hook sets are something beginners rush. The instinct is to yank the moment you feel anything, but with a frog, you wait 1 full second before sweeping the rod. That 1 second delay lets the fish close its mouth around the bait. Set too early and you pull it clean out every time. Circle hooks are worth knowing about for live bait situations. They roll into the corner of the mouth on their own, no hard hook set needed. Just steady pressure. The Gamakatsu octopus circle is sharp straight out of the pack. That matters more than most people realize. A dull hook loses fish before the fight even starts. Lew's Laser SG1 is worth mentioning alongside the Ugly Stick. It's a cleaner feel, more feedback through the blank, and still under $80. The Monster Bass Tungsten Pro Pack bundles weights, stops, beads, and swivels together. For beginners, buying it as a kit beats hunting individual components across 3 different aisles. Fishing clubs are genuinely underused. Most counties have one, dues run cheap, and the collective knowledge inside that room took decades to accumulate. The AFCO Samurai shirt runs up 50 and dries fast. It sounds like a luxury until you've spent 6 hours in direct sun without one. A packable rain jacket belongs in the bag year-round. Weather changes faster than forecasts, and a wet angler packs up early every time. The Urban Angler backpack has a built-in rod holder and a hydration sleeve. Small details, but they matter when you're covering 2 miles of bank on foot. Assorted hooks from size 6 to 2 cover trout, pike, and bass without needing separate purchases. One small pack handles most freshwater situations. Spinning reels account for over 55% of global reel sales. There's a reason, they're forgiving, versatile, and the right call for nearly every beginner situation. The invisible reel idea is real. When the drag is smooth and the weight is right, you stop thinking about the equipment and start reading the water. 80% of tournament anglers use artificial lures. The fish aren't impressed by price tags, they respond to action, depth, and timing. Everything else is noise the industry sells you to feel better about not catching fish. The fish don't know what your rod costs. They know if your presentation is right, your timing is honest, and your patience held longer than theirs did. If this saved you money or put fish in your hands, share it with someone just starting out. That's the whole point. Pass it on.